Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. And I'm coming on here to talk about an album that I think for its time was quite ahead of its time, super ahead of its time. Maybe not a direct influence on things as we hear them today, but maybe in the late 90s, a bit of the shape of rap to come kind of thing. The record I'm talking about is, I'm breaking it over here. It's the second Old Dirty Bastard record over here. This is my personal CD copy of that. Yeah, I still listen to CDs. I mean, you could play them in the car, so, it's usually where I play them if I'm listening to CDs. And I grew up with CDs, so I have a lot of CDs still lying around because I haven't thrown away my CDs. I actually threw away a ton of CDs or sold off a lot of CDs that I used to listen to, just like bad, like new metal CDs. And honestly, I kind of regret it. So there are a lot of CDs that I keep around, even ones like this one. For a while, I liked it, but I kind of thought it was like a novelty record. You know what I mean? Like I thought it was just kind of freakish and weird and silly and ridiculous, and I'll get into why. But it hasn't really been until very recently that I've kind of realized that, like, damn, this record is like so fucking predictive in a way, and the reason being that it's in a lot of ways unlike what ODB was doing here on his first record, 36 Chambers, Dirty Version, which, yeah, he had wild flows on there. He was very animated. He was very shimmy, shimmy, y'all, shimmy, yam, shimmy, yay. Like, nobody at the time was doing that shit. Like, sure, a lot of that New York hardcore hip hop stuff was all about, like, blah, and just, like, being freaky and being over the top and, just being very animated. But the thing is, like, ODB, he was a real deal. It was not an act. Like, dude was literally off the wall. And you could see that in this second record over here. You could see that in this album because, like, no other rapper was willing to take it this far. No other rapper was taking it this far. And what exactly I mean by that is simultaneously this record contains some of ODB's catchiest material. I mean, this thing has obviously Got Your Money featuring Khalees, like, hey, hey, maybe I got your money. Like, really catchy, smooth, fun song that was quite a hit. Like, they played that song a lot, at least around where I was. We heard that song a lot on the radio. And he did get a lot of heat for that record, a lot of criticism for that record, because that was like a pop record. That was like a pop single. It wasn't the hardcore, low down, dirty stuff. But, like, you get into the nitty gritty of this album, and it's some of the freakiest, most abrasive rap music ever. Which is actually kind of hilarious considering that you have quite a few beats on here from the Neptunes, quite a few beats that are maybe a little catchier, a little groovier, a little funkier. It's not quite throughout kind of the filthy, grimy, dirty RZA style production that people have come to know from ODB and the Wu-Tang brand. I mean, in 1999, even RZA's production wasn't sounding quite the way that it did in the early and mid 90s, So there was some cleanliness to some of the production on this record, but ODB on the album is fucking screaming his brains out. He's just yelling at the top of his lungs. These just wild, insane, crazy vocalizations. The tracks on here where he's singing, he's yelling so loud into the microphone on this thing that, like, the microphone is clipping. Like, the audio is clipping audibly all over this record, especially on parts like the Rick James cover on Cold Blooded. Which, it's one of a few songs on here that are not so much rap songs, but sung songs. And Old Dirty Bastard's sort of approach to vocals is just so crazy. I don't know. It's still kind of beyond description. And the thing to me about this record that's so ahead of the curve is that there's so many rappers out there right now, especially in the underground, where it's just all about being as loud as possible, as aggressive as possible, as in your face as possible, screaming your brains out. The mic is peaking. It's really distorted, just trying to be as savage and as insane and just trying to look like on the outside, like as much of a nutcase as possible. In the case of ODB, though, like, the dude was the real deal. The dude, like, literally had a lot of problems that were eventually his undoing in the mid 2000s. And you can actually kind of hear a lot of that culminating on on this record. You know, as Rick James says, which I think is an apt reference given the Cold-Blooded cover on this record. But you know, as Rick James says, cocaine is a hell of a drug. Now, the drug references on this thing, the violent wordplay, ODB sounding like this. I don't know, the way that he kind of hits on women on this record is just crazy as well. Like there's nothing about his delivery on this record that is, it's all unhinged. It's all just so amazingly unhinged. And I feel like in kind of a landscape where it's almost like rappers come off more marketable if they're insane, or rappers come off more marketable if they're crazy, or rappers are more viral and more exciting if they're just totally out of control. Like, this record is that to a T. And it's that to a T, and simultaneously it has like a weird amount of pop appeal to it. Like I've never heard a rap album that to my ears was so incredibly poppy, so incredibly catchy, and yet simultaneously, like, the performances on it were insane. The performances on it, the vocals on it were really abrasive, were really grating and noisy and over the top. I mean, I guess maybe another one that comes to mind, and I'm not going to say Death Grips here because, you know, to me Death Grips is a totally different animal. But I guess the only other modern record that comes to mind is probably The Life of Pablo. And again, you know, some of these more underground SoundCloud rappers and all that. But you know, really to me, those are the only things that kind of come close to this album. And I feel like the extremity of this record, again, was so ahead of the curve. And in a lot of ways, I feel like still this album is still a cut above a lot of these artists in terms of the display of just wild, unadulterated insanity. Now, you know, despite all of this, ODB does have some compelling and funny and catchy lyrics on this record, and he does manage to put together some pretty cool songs. Let me see. Rolling, Jesus, I'm rolling with you. Jesus, rolling with you is amazing. Fuck with me is hilarious. You don't want me to is grimy as fuck, and Dirt Dog is fantastic as fuck. Yeah, I mean, it's just a raw fucking album, man. It's one of the rawest albums ever made, and there's really all there is to it. You know, this is great. This is great. This is very good. This is a very good record, but it's a little more traditional in comparison with this. Like, this is the true insanity right here. This was so crazy back in the day. I mean, the record did pretty well. It charted. And, you know, there's like some Neptunes production on this thing too, which, I mean, ODB wasn't the first person to be working with the Neptunes or anything, but 1999, I would say, is like the first year where they really, really blew up. Like, you know, before that, they were working with Jay-Z. Jay-Z had like a piece of Neptunes production before that year, but I don't know. There was just something about 1999 where the Neptunes were just on the map. They were just on the fucking map. And, you know, it's I guess that's another thing about this album that was ahead of the curve too. I mean, there were a lot of records in the late 90s that had Neptunes production on them because they were just getting so hot. But not every one of them has sort of maintained their luster in the way that I think this record has. Not only maintained their luster, but I think over the years become more relevant. Because, again, with the note of extremity that we hear coming through in the rap game right now, and also just kind of like the blunt, simple, just very in-your-face lyricism. I guess, you know, just like how cutthroat and deadly some of what this album has to offer is. I think that was all just, like, predictive. I think it was all ahead of the curve. And, you know, ODB, I think, again, was kind of like in the throes of a lot of the issues that he was dealing with and kind of putting those out onto the microphone. You know, that just kind of was what it was. You know, he wasn't trying to sort of make a record that people down the road would be unconsciously kind of copying in a way. Excuse me. But still, you know, I feel like this is an album that maybe critically at the time, some people might not have gotten or might not have appreciated, or fans, hardcore fans over the years have constantly written this record off and have, said, well, that's the lesser of the two, big ODB records. I mean, the superior record is obviously, the superior record is obviously the dirty version, of 36 Chambers. That's a superior record. And sure, while that may be the case in terms of totally just judging ODB strictly by the traditional standards of hip-hop music, to me, his second record, his follow-up album, it just presents a different way forward. This record presents a different way forward, in my opinion. This record presents like a totally different way of doing things. This like kind of aggression, this punk simplicity in a way, kind of boiling things down and just making the appeal of a song be purely about the madness and the attitude that you present on the microphone. And I think that's just how I'm going to end this off. I hope you all are doing well, and I will catch you in another video. Over here next to my head is one more that you can hit up, or hit the link to subscribe to the channel, or hit the hit that reminder bell as well if you manage to do that. All right, I will see you guys very soon, forever.